Who is Vladimir Putin, and how did he become one of the most powerful and most controversial leaders in the world? In this video, we will take a closer look at his early life, his years in the KGB, his rise to the Kremlin, and the key events that shaped both his image and modern Russia itself. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born on October 7, 1952, in Leningrad, today called St. Petersburg, in what was then the Soviet Union. His family lived in a small shared apartment in a city that had suffered terribly during the Second World War. Putin has described his childhood as tough, but also as a time when he learned to stand up for himself. As a teenager, he became interested in martial arts, especially judo and sambo. He later said that these sports taught him discipline, respect for rules, and how to read an opponent. As a young man, Putin studied law at Leningrad State University. There, he joined the Communist Party and began to think about a career in state service. After graduating in the mid-1970s, he entered the Soviet intelligence service, the KGB. For about 16 years, Putin worked as a foreign intelligence officer. He spent part of the 1980s in East Germany, in the city of Dresden, where he monitored political developments and gathered information. When the Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet system he had served began to collapse. In 1991, after the failed coup in Moscow and the breakup of the Soviet Union, Putin left the KGB and returned to his home city, just as Russia was entering a period of deep economic and political crisis. In the early 1990s, Putin moved into local politics in St. Petersburg. He worked in the mayor's office, dealing with foreign relations and investment. Colleagues later described him as quiet, loyal, and very effective behind the scenes. In 1996, Putin was invited to Moscow to join the administration of President Boris Yeltsin. Russia at that time was struggling with economic chaos, powerful oligarchs, and a central government that looked weak. Within just a few years, Putin moved rapidly through important positions. He became deputy chief of the presidential administration. Then, in 1998, director of the Federal Security Service, the FSB, the main successor to the KGB. In August 1999, Boris Yeltsin appointed him Prime Minister of Russia. By then, many Russians still knew very little about him. But that was about to change. At the end of 1999, a series of events pushed Putin into the national spotlight. Russia was fighting in Chechnya again, and a wave of violence and fear spread through the country. Putin took a hard line, promising to restore order and defend the state. His tough image and direct language helped him gain support. On December 31, 1999, Boris Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned and named Putin acting president of Russia. Just a few months later, in March 2000, Putin won the presidential election. He would be re-elected in 2004, and from that point on, he would remain the central figure in Russian politics. During Putin's first years as president, Russia's economy grew strongly. High oil and gas prices brought in huge revenues, and many Russians saw their living standards improve. Supporters say that Putin brought stability. After the chaotic 1990s, they argue that he helped pay off debt, strengthened the state, and restored a sense of national pride. But critics tell a very different story. They say that Putin used this period of growth to concentrate power in the Kremlin, to weaken independent media, and to limit political competition. Over the years, many journalists, activists, and opposition figures have faced legal pressure, harassment, or worse, because the Russian Constitution did not allow more than 2 consecutive presidential terms. Putin stepped down as president in 2008, His close ally Dmitry Medvedev took over the presidency, while Putin became prime minister. Many observers, however, believed that Putin still held the real power. This arrangement became known as the tandem, or tandemocracy. In 2008, during this period, Russia fought a short war with Georgia over the regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. The conflict ended quickly, but it sent a message that Russia was ready to use force in its neighborhood to defend what it saw as its interests. In 2012, Putin returned to the presidency after a controversial election and street protests in Moscow. A change in the
Liderin
constitution
evine dün
had
baskın
extended
düzenlenmiş ve
presidential
bazı
terms
liderler gözaltına
from 4
alınmıştı.
years to 6.
Pushkin
This
Meydanı'nda
meant
yapılan
that
gösteriye
Putin could
katılan tek
potentially
muhalif
stay
lider
in
ise
power
Sergey Udaltsov
for
oldu.
many more years.
Bugün bu
After his
insanlarla
return
beraber
to the
olmak
presidency in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine after a disputed referendum that most Western countries did not recognize. Inside Russia, the move was extremely popular, and many people saw it as correcting a historical mistake. Outside Russia, however, it led to sanctions and a deep crisis in relations with the
Ukrayna'nın
West.
Karadeniz kıyısındaki liman
Around the
şehri
same
Odessa'da
time,
42 kişinin
conflict
hayatını
broke out
kaybetmesinin
in
ardından
eastern
ülkenin
Ukraine,
doğusuna yayılan
where
çatışmalar
Russian-backed
şiddetleniyor.
forces fought against Ukrainian troops.
Kramatorsk
The
şehrinde Rusya
fighting
yanlısı
never fully
ayrılıkçılarla
stopped,
Ukrayna ordusu
and
arasında
relations
çatışmalar
between
devam
Russia
etti.
and Western
Çatışmaların
countries
ardından Ukrayna
grew
ordusu
even
kente
colder.
tamamen hakim
In
olduğunu duyurdu.
2015, Russia also entered the Syrian civil war.
Ukrayna
It
ordusu
sent
ayrıca
aircraft and
Slavyansk'la
troops to
Kramatorsk
support the
arasında bir
Syrian
güvenlik
president
noktası oluşturdu
Bashar
ve buraya
al-Assad.
yerleştirdi.
This intervention helped
Ordu
Assad
Kramatorsk
stay in
yakınlarındaki
power and
Slavyansk'ta da
confirmed
Rusya yanlısı
Russia's
silah
role as a major military player in the Middle East. At home, Putin continued to tighten control over the political system. New laws made it harder for independent organizations and media outlets to operate. The internet and social networks came under increasing pressure. Many analysts describe Russia as a highly centralized system, built around loyalty to the president, with fewer and fewer channels for real opposition. In February 2022, Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war has caused enormous destruction and loss of life, and has brought some of the toughest sanctions Russia has ever faced. Western countries have supplied Ukraine with weapons and financial support, while Russia has tried to adapt its economy and deepen ties with non-Western partners. In 2023, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin over alleged war crimes related to the deportation of Ukrainian children from occupied territories. Russia rejected the accusations, but the warrant made international travel more complicated and showed how deeply divided global opinion is on Putin and the war. In 2024, he won another presidential election after constitutional changes that could allow him to remain in office for many more years. Observers say that the Russian political system is now more personalized, more centralized, and more focused on loyalty than ever before. So, who is Vladimir Putin? To his supporters, he is the leader who saved Russia from chaos, rebuilt its strength, defended its interests abroad, and stood up to the West. To his critics, he is an authoritarian ruler who has weakened democratic institutions, silenced independent voices, and led his country into dangerous confrontations and costly wars. What is clear is that Putin has shaped Russia for more than 2 decades. His choices have changed the lives of millions of people, both inside and outside his country.